Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Healthy Entrepreneur Show. I am so happy for this episode. I'm so excited because I have a special guest tonight, and her name is Sabrina Morrison. Sabrina is a certified trainer in mental health, specifically with first aid responders in a mental health crisis. And I can't even begin to tell you guys how excited I am to talk about this. Before we begin, I just want to tell you a little bit about this show. This show is called The Healthy Entrepreneur, which is produced by Business Takeout. It's a it's a podcast platform that showcases shows that help entrepreneurs in in various ways. And on this particular one, we talk about the health and the well-being of individuals, whether you're an entrepreneur or not. But we focus on matters that deal with health and wellness and living a life filled with purpose. Maybe that's a better term to put it, and helping entrepreneurs to thrive. My name is Maxine Choy, and I'm a certified health and nutrition coach, and I work with women to help them achieve attainable health goals by incorporating mindset, accountability, and being consistent. So this show is brought to you by Business Takeout, as I said again. And without further ado, I'm just going to go right into it and just introduce everyone to Sabrina and have her just have the floor. So, Sabrina, tell us a little bit about you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sabrina Morrison, as Maxine said. Born and raised in Toronto/Brampton, and I moved all the way to Alberta almost 10 years ago. So I've been doing work across Canada pertaining to mental health, mental wellness, advocacy, and healing. Personally, I had a rough childhood, and into my late teens, early 20s, I had a lot of panic attacks and sleepless nights. And later on, fast forward, I realized I lived with PTSD. So I said, well, since I live with it, I'm not it. I can change my life.
Exactly.
So I started my healing. I became a mental health first aid instructor. I've done work through Sacred Women International. I hired a life coach, continue to do so. Got different forms of healing techniques from other high priests and priestesses so that I can support myself. Now I'm in a place where I can support my community, especially my beautiful Black and African Caribbean women.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
love that story. I didn't the fact that you were actually a victim or a child or growing up with this, and now it has brought you into this field of being able to help with mental health, especially in the Black community, right?
Mhm.
And I know when we were talking, you do a vast amount of things, and I think that I thought you were just so incredibly talented. You offer mental health training to healthcare professionals,
Mhm.
right? You also teach individuals to how to deal with issues that relate to people having self-infliction, self-injury, self-harm, and you also provide assistance or training to people who want to be able to help the people in the community who are
Mhm.
suffering with mental health. And one of the important topics we want to talk about is identifying the difference between mental health, mental wellness, and mental illness.
Mhm.
Because you know, the mental health seems to be the one word everybody just uses, and it's sort of become this. Okay, well, I have a mental health issue. I suffer from a mental health issue, but there are differences. So we're gonna
100%. Yeah.
Right. So we're going to dissect them, and we're going to go with mental health. So let's define mental health. Somebody who says,
Well, so there are formal terms that we can go online and look at World Health Organization or Public Health of Canada, but I'm going to sum it up real quick. So mental health, it's the health of the mind,
mhm,
point blank.
absolutely,
Physical health or physical health is the health of the physical body. So one's the mind and one's the body.
Absolutely.
So when we say mental health, it's not a disorder, it's not a problem, it's not an illness, it's the health of the mind.
Exactly.
So that's kind of the first bit that I like to clarify. So if someone says, how's your mental health? I'm not crazy. It's not that. It's like if someone says, oh, my stomach's been aching for 6 months. When's the last time you did a physical? What's your mental health like? That's really how it is.
Yes.
Right. So that's the first one.
Mm-hmm.
There's also a definition that I also wanted to offer is mental health problem. So again, the problem could be fogged memory, racing thoughts, shortness of breath, oversleeping, undersleeping, negative, why am I living? Why am I here? I'm no good, negative self-talk, So that may be considered a mental health problem. Okay, let's bring this to the physical health. So if you have a runny nose or if you're sneezing, does that mean you have COVID? No. It doesn't even mean you have a cold. It means that your nose is running and there's a problem with your physical system and your body is trying to, give you indicators that something's wrong.
Exactly. And your body reacts to certain things. If you're under a great amount of stress, that could trigger, you getting stuffy or getting a headache or something, or a really bad stomach ache. So
100%.
A mental health situation where your mind is not coinciding with how your body should feel, and then it just sends off triggers. So I think that when people say I have a mental health issue, we automatically start to feel, oh my gosh, they have a problem.
Right.
But it's not necessarily a problem. It's a certain situation.
It could be a situation, or it's not an illness. So someone says, I have a mental health problem. It's not an illness because, we can have a mental health problem on our graduation day. The anxiety is high. Mm-hmm. Having a baby, right. Getting a new job. These are good things, according to society meaning, right, of good things. But your mental health can be adjusted from the baseline, the normal way of thinking and feeling.
Right. Okay.
So
right.
Yeah.
So we've got that part. So let's talk about mental wellness.
That's my favorite part.
And that was my favorite part.
So I'm going to do the comparison. Mm-hmm. So mental illness is when there's either a diagnosis or a need for a diagnosis.
So we're talking about mental wellness though, right?
Yeah, I'm going to compare the two.
Perfect.
So when we talk about mental illness, that's like sick, right? But the wellness is building the capacity to cope, to prevent. So wellness is around the prevention. So what does that look like? For many people, it's walking, laughing. Me love my music. Me not gonna lie. I love my music. So I will blast my music, right?
Exactly. So it's preparing yourself in an atmosphere of wellness. So it means taking care of yourself, eating, sleeping, drinking your water, going for walks, just basically creating an atmosphere of wellness for your life so that you can be well.
100%. Mm-hmm. And so what do we do when we don't want the sniffles? We take vitamins.
Yes.
Right? Yes. We sleep right. We keep our stress. Stress compromises the immune system by 50%. Right? And stress also has huge implications on our mind, the way we think and feel. So keeping our stress levels low, that's about wellness, is really the number one thing for a mental health problem or illness. The baseline is stress.
Absolutely.
Right? Even if it's a genetic disorder from your family, your mother's mother had it, it's still triggered off from stress.
Absolutely. Right.
So
it's important for everyone to keep track of what they do on a daily basis so that you can maintain wellness in your life, and eventually it leads to just an overall healthy state of mind. Because when your mind starts to believe that you're sick, well, what starts to happen, just like the COVID thing, right?
Right.
And a lot of people have had a lot of mental issues since COVID, since the lockdown. And if they didn't have a strong mental health issue before,
Mm-hmm.
then it has been escalated now. So the anxiety has heightened, the stress, the worry, the fear. Then there's like the depression and the loneliness, and there's a lot of things that have come up with people now since this pandemic, and it's become so concerning for anybody in the medical field, or even in your field that
Oh,
you work.
100%. Yeah.
Right, and we have many people who are not able to afford to get the help they need, the professional help, or even the families around them to support them during this time, right? Because even if they do have people, they're also suffering or experiencing some difficult times as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, in a case where somebody has a mental issue, which we're going to talk about the next one, mental illness, what can you speak on that one?
So in the mental health first aid training, we talk about signs and symptoms. So basically, what is a person's baseline? Everybody knows Sabrina's bubbly. I'm bubbly. I could be going through the worst of the worst and the best of the best. I will find a way to bust a joke. That's just me.
Right.
If I'm quiet, and I love food, right? So if I'm quiet and exactly, so if I'm quiet and not eating, that's a difference from my baseline. So when we see a difference in our baselines or family friend baseline, that's first of all the triggering to say, okay, what's going on?
Mm-hmm.
And then we look at signs and symptoms. Signs are what we see, symptoms are what a person may feel.
Right.
Overeating, undereating, oversleeping, undersleeping, irritability, mood swings, crying spills,
Mm-hmm.
The shortness of temperament.
Yep. The being fidgety. Yeah.
Right. And some of those are the more obvious ones, but what about those subtle ones like back pain, stomach pain, gas, headache, sore throat? I'm not saying you have these things now, it's a mental health issue, but the stress of the mind can and usually will, filter through the body if it doesn't get a chance to release through wellness.
Right. No, absolutely right. So with now that we have this pandemic happening, what are you finding being a mental health, being a respondent in this area? Are you finding that it has escalated the need for first responders to come to help people with mental health issues? Has it increased a lot?
So my 9-to-5 job is a case manager's complex needs, right? And I've been doing that for many years. So in my job, total increase, right? And the increase is really from people who's never had to ask the system for help, who's always had a job, even if it was a minimum paying job. They've always been secured and self-sufficient. So now they don't know what to do and they're lost. So right away, it creates this anxiety. Now put this deadly disease, on top of that. Now put isolation on top of that.
Absolutely.
Right? Now put away disrupting their daily routine, which is one of the protective factors for mental wellness, right? Or mental illness, I should say, is having a positive, healthy daily routine. Right. So now their daily routine is out the door.
All out the way. Yeah.
Right? And so that's my 9-to-5 job. Now, the mental health instructor is my passion job. And especially in the African Caribbean Black community, I love my Black folk. And when I'm speaking to my sisters or brothers, now we have systemic racism at the rise of they're seeing either more of it or people are more fragile, which introduce microaggressions and things like that, So that what a lot of people don't know is microaggressions, isolation, bullying in a workplace especially, that has injury on the brain. And the brain can't distinguish, oh, it's an emotion or it's a broken leg. It's pain on the brain, and the brain registers those microaggressions, systemic racism, bullying, isolation as a physical injury, as though you broke your leg. So that's how severe the trauma is for our people. So there's an increase in that for many reasons, since the George Floyd, since COVID, you know, and even before that, but now it's just heightened, right? So I've definitely seen an increase even within myself. I have to put more self-care and caring for myself way more, right? So yeah, definitely an increase.
That I can imagine that. And I want to just get to some comments that I saw pop up. I know Makisha Boyd said hello. So we're going to read Erica Levine. So at the beginning of the pandemic, March 2020, I could not believe how stress impacted me. I had no heavy breathing, no palpitations. I thought happens with stress. Okay, so I think that what she's saying is that she couldn't believe that it impacted her, and she had all those things, heavy breathing, palpitations, all the things that happen with stress. And I mean, even myself, I went through periods of like not stress, but a little bit of a panic. Panic about my future, the future of what's going to happen with the things I want to do. I'm a very social person, and I was like worried about everything that I was doing was going to be like shut down. And it just made me think, well, what am I living for? I mean, I've got my life to live, but like it's a scary thought, and you become panicky, or you start to get nervous because you don't know what next. And but thank you so much for sharing that. Sorry, hopefully, you found some kind of way to cope and got some help, somehow. I want to touch on something. And it was what we were speaking about when we talked about when there's a mental health issue. So let's get real graphic and say somebody is maybe about to do something damaging to themselves, right? And it's a threatened situation where we need someone to come in. And most often, you're looking at police officer coming to their aid, or somebody from like a paramedic or whoever, right? These are uniformed people, licensed people who are called first, right? And oftentimes, if it's a person of color or religion or whatever, it can be a little bit of a challenge because they're in a different category, different level of life and understanding what's happening. Can you speak on that and how what you are doing has changed, and what are you hoping for this?
So my intention is always to give the right information. Giving the right information to first responders, whether you're a pharmacist and you're running one of the methadone programs, right? You're seeing a lot, right? Or you're direct EMS and you're responding to a shooting or a stabbing, or you're a caregiver for people who are involved in one of the emergency calls or what have you.
Right.
And so one of my goals is to give the right information. Mental health, let's really rephrase that. Mental disorder and mental illness is a real thing. It's not a character defect. You're not low, you're not crazy, you're not mentally challenged, but it's a real sickness, just like diabetes, just like cancer. A person vomiting, my grandmother, when she was diagnosed with cancer and she was ew, you're sick, you're not. No, that would never be my response because she's sick. So some of these first responders, and whether I've done it for RCMP, I've done it for the firefighter chief, I've done it for nurses, psych nurses, because first responding is different from clinical work. I'm not a clinician at all.
Right.
I want to make that clear. But I support with the information of signs and symptoms and where to go for help and how to navigate the system. So some of the benefits that I've seen doing this training is that now they know the signs and symptoms, especially culturally.
Culturally,
culturally.
exactly.
So
Yeah.
doing this training for the African community, now they feel safe to have conversations because of religion or culture,
Mhm.
and the stigma around, mental
Absolutely.
health. The other part is what's called secondary trauma.
Mhm.
There's other names of secondary trauma where you're not the person that experienced the crisis, but you
Right.
either heard about it, seen it on your phone, or witnessed it. So you're the
Mhm.
second person to experience that. You are just at risk of developing a mental illness like PTSD or acute stress disorder or
Mhm.
even depression, and people don't know that.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Interesting. Hmm.
So, in the training, when I talk about trauma, um, we touch. We've had conversations around epigenetics, but that's not in the training material. What's in the training material is trauma and how to respond to trauma, and secondary trauma is huge,
Right.
right?
Um, there was a situation where a police officer in Toronto, police officer had gone to intervene on a mental health situation, and the person ended up jumping.
That's what was reported,
Okay, right.
right?
And then so now, you know, there was this talk about defunding police because they need to focus on so that police can use the money to fund first responders as opposed to funding police in that area because maybe they're not trained. Maybe it's just too much for them. They can do other things rather
Mhm.
than trying to go into like a black person of color or whatever or indigenous people, whatever the case may be, right? So have you seen a change in that? Because I know recently there was something on the news where the government was going to do something about that. Is that helping your cause at all in the community?
Education is always the key, right?
Right.
Um, Education actually gives people power, right?
Mhm.
And once a person is educated, now they have the tools to make a proper decision based on the right information they're giving. So it will always help. Now, with that particular situation and other situations I've seen out west where it's involving our indigenous brothers and sisters,
Mhm.
there's another level of education, which is cultural training, anti-Black racism training,
Okay.
some historical trauma. So that in conjunction with how to respond is,
Mhm.
is key. Will that change a person's heart? Maybe not, maybe
Mhm.
so.
Right.
But there are many people who reached out to me after the fact, whether they were government workers, provincial or municipal, across the country that I've trained. I've always gotten emails, at least 2 or 3. Thank you so much. I was able to use some of
Right.
the tools
Mhm.
to support a youth in a group home or to support the police officer when he came.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's important. That's important because you're able to connect with that person if it's a black youth or even if you've got somebody in another culture who can respond to somebody in the Asian community, right?
100%.
I just feel that it makes a huge difference. And I think that's going to be what's going to change mental health crisis situations when people are, you know, about to do something harmful to themselves or even needing someone to support. Is there any kind of so after when you train people to be first responders, what happens when they actually save somebody from whatever or they intervene? Is there like a follow up or a group that's formed?
So in our training, there's not a follow up, but we depend on the organization that they work for because I normally do it for employees.
Okay.
Very, very rarely. Sometimes I have mothers who come in or fathers who care providers. So I do have a few of those people who come in, but most of the people, they're either volunteers or workers, right?
Okay.
And so I always say, learn the policy of your organization. If they don't had it before, they better have it now. Psychological health and wellness.
Oh.
So I know today is not about too much of the organizational training, but I do organizational training for mental wellness. So that's why I could bring it up, because that part of it is suited here. Right. And so psychological health and safety, just like regular health and safety, PPE, So what is, and I would offer, challenge your organization. Do we have something around psychological health and safety? It is legal or illegal for them not to provide that, whether it's the EAP proper training, because my mom always says prevention is better than cure.
Absolutely.
Right? So there has to be. So organizations, I don't care if you have 3 employees or 3,000 or 300,000. Right now, there's a lot of material out there to support, even if you're doing a COVID response around psychological health and safety. Right. So that's something we do, and we are offering, and it's something that I think personally is important, to implement in your work. So follow the guidelines and the policies and procedures and processes of your workplace when you're dealing with post-crisis. Now, if we talk about self-care, that's something different, right?
That's interesting. And I have a question to ask you. But I saw some questions on the screen. Okay, so James Gregg says, are self-employed people more likely to suffer from mental illness? You want to answer that one?
So mental illness doesn't have a position, a career, a color, a gender. Mind you, some people may, from certain backgrounds, might have more resiliency, right? Which is really good, but your profession or anything like that won't make you more at risk. Now, let's look at the risk factors. Isolation, financial. Financial is number one. Being a pessimist. Right? Having negative thoughts.
Absolutely.
Right? Having a negative environment. And that's huge.
Or our family support, like those kind of things.
Like no family support, right? So because I've been self-employed for many years while I work, while I not work. And it's very stressful. It's very, very stressful. And if you don't have a positive daily routine, please, my brother and sisters, my people, whether you're an entrepreneur or not, please have a daily routine regimen. Positive. Because these are the protective factors. Health, thank you. It's all about wellness. It's all about creating coping mechanisms so that if I'm hit with a bullet, I have this bulletproof vest.
You're 100% mentally prepared, and you've developed ways to cope, right?
Yeah.
So English Forbes says, my employer stressed that we use the mental health platform, especially during the beginning of COVID. Not a lot of companies have these programs. And it's true. In Canada, we have it here, but there's a lot of companies, if they're small, they may not have that, right?
So a lot of my work is navigating through the system, which I love because it's like the more complex is the more I learn about the various systems. So Ontario is more populated than Alberta. So I'll acknowledge that, meaning wait times are more, things like that. One way you could navigate the system is you go to your doctor and you say, I think I have some form of stress happening. Because this is the difference between my baseline. My baseline is here. I
Right.
was sleeping 6 hours. Now I'm sleeping 4 hours. Now I'm down to 3 hours, for example. So
That's
you
a
go
point.
to your doctor. You don't want to diagnose yourself because I
Yeah.
believe the mouth can speak life and death into your life or negative and positive. So I really, really offer, you don't want to diagnose yourself, but if you know the signs and symptoms are different from your baseline, go to your doctor. The doctor can then make an internal referral to see, just like a dietitian, right? Just like an ear and nose throat specialist,
Right.
they can
Right.
refer you to see a clinical social worker or a social worker that's a therapist, things like that. So that's free. If you go through the system, that's free.
Right.
There's CAMH. I know CAMH is there. I can't remember all the resources in Toronto. I use 211.ca. 'Cause that's
Didn't know that.
provincial. That's like it's national actually.
National.
Yeah.
Okay. Mhm.
So I use 211 dot .ca. I just read a post that CAFCAN, I believe they're offering some supports. So I would offer 211.ca, or you go through your doctors. If it's really bad, always go to the emergency, especially for me when I was having my panic attacks way back when. I just went to the emergency. A panic attack is identical to a heart attack.
Mm-hmm.
The only difference is one's fatal and one wears off.
Yes.
So
Exactly.
if you're having that, please go to the emergency. If they're like, oh, your ECG, everything's fine, you're good to go, then you know, okay, maybe it's mental emotional, and ask for help there. And that social worker or discharge nurse should be able to, make a referral. But sometimes we don't even go to the doctor because of stigma. It's the family doctor. They see my wife, they see my husband, they see, right? So you can go to a walk-in clinic, right? And ask for that referral.
You said something about sometimes they don't go to the doctor because of stigma or family stuff. And I think that as Black people and as West Indians, we've always had this notion that, we don't have mental health issues, go pray and,
At a demon.
yes.
Yeah.
But more and more, it's become so prevalent, and it's a serious thing. And I think we've always had it, but it's just that we deal with it in different ways because culturally we grow up in a certain environment that teaches us to have mental toughness and all that stuff, right? I don't know, like
Honestly, this is one of the biggest
fib.
questions that come up is in the Black community, whether it's my Black Muslims and brothers and sisters, or Christians, or even atheists or Rastafarian. There's so many diverse people that we've had this conversation. So the number one thing that I've always said is, us as Black people or African Caribbean, whatever you identify as, we've normalized dysfunction. I'm just going to be straight up. We normalized dysfunction, and we normalized toxic behaviors. It's not okay to yell at the top of your lungs. You know why it's not okay? Because if your boss did that to you at work, would you say, okay? You would not. You would feel a way. So why is it okay to do it to a child or your husband or your wife or a person in the house? So it's not okay. So let's talk about some of these dysfunctions that we have, whether it's from historical trauma, whether it's from keeping family secrets. I have a few girlfriends who later on found out that they live with bipolar mood disorder.
Right.
And the whole time they might yell upon them, pitney, and do it, and all these years they were, so unhealthy towards their children, and now
Realizing that they had a disorder.
And not realize, because of the stigma and the shame, and they're like, well, my mother yelled at me, my father beat me, so it's way to discipline a child, right? And one of my mentors, and a beautiful woman, Anania Anodele, she was the first person that says you don't have to put a finger on your child. And I'm a single parent. Right. And half of my son's almost an adult now. Half of his years I was a hot sizzling mess. I didn't know. And the other half is like, oh, I'm healed. Okay, let's do this. And the young man that he's become is really me shifting that my mind around what is wellness and how can I communicate in a place that's well.
Exactly.
Right. So we've normalized our dysfunctions. You can't see the picture when you're in the frame. So many of us I didn't know that beating your child is not healthy. Discipline is healthy. In fact, they want to be disciplined. But, like beating down and I'm not talking about a spank on the butt or holding. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about abuse.
Abuse, exactly.
Verbal or physical, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And some of us, because I'm first generation Canadian and my parents are Caribbean, it was like, well, my grandmother did it and mama did it to me and I'm fine. Are you really fine? Like really, like let's talk, let's speak the truth. Like, are you really good? Are you really happy? Are you really well?
Exactly.
So that's a whole conversation in itself.
It is a whole conversation, and it's quite interesting because maybe we are suffering a lot more with our mental health than we think, right? And we suppress it because like I said, I've never heard of mental health issues until I started working in the corporate world, and I used to hear about anxiety and stress, and stress I knew, but like it wasn't even a part of my makeup. And I think that with our generation now, that's like a cop-out word. And I don't want to sound insensitive, but it feels to me as if somebody would try to label themselves or as having a mental health issue just so that they can get out of something, whether it's school, work, or some kind of obligation, because they say, well, I have anxiety and I have whatever. I don't know. Like I don't want to create anything here, but I see a lot of people who I believe can be a little bit more stronger than they think, or they can shift their mindset, but they choose not to because it's easy to just say, I suffer from anxiety. I don't know.
So that, remember earlier I said that the mouth can speak life.
Yeah.
So I was in a bad car accident. I don't even know, almost 2 decades ago, right? Not to age myself, but I look sweet because I eat a lot of candy and a lot of but almost 2 decades about that. Anyhow, that's not the point. The point is that my healing was very hard. My car was totaled on the highway on 401 East. Okay. My healing was hard at first. And my mother is a very strong person. You need to speak life in your life, man. Speak, And because I'm in pain, I'm tired. I am. And the body doesn't know what's negative or positive. The body knows what you tell it. Absolutely. I am tired, it will be tired. I am anxious, I am anxious. I will be. I am depressed, I'm going to be depressed. Money is hard, I'm broke, I'm poor, I'm mean.
All those affirmations.
All of those stuff.
Moving into existence into your life.
The body, and when we hear it. So epigenetics is something that hopefully we can touch on. I don't want to get into it too deep, but our environment changes our DNA. And our DNA changes the protein that's developed in the body. So now when we're hearing, you're just sick like your father, and you're just sick like your mother, and you're just lazy like your cousin, all of a sudden your environment changes the DNA, and the DNA changes the body. And now you actually feel tired, depressed, or anxious.
Exactly.
So is it a cop-out? Maybe. Or is it you're speaking it more into existence? So now your body has created a new familiar way of being, and instead of being vibrant, it's going to be anxious.
Right, exactly. No, right? Very true. This has been an interesting topic, and I really we've gone so past the time, which is fine. Yeah. And if for the listeners who are still on here, I do appreciate you staying on. And please, I encourage you to share this, like and share this podcast. And please don't forget to follow the page of Business Takeout for this and other podcasts that they do. Um, Sabrina, I want to thank you so much for just shedding some light on this. And I know we'll be talking again very soon in the next episode. We won't reveal the topic, but I love the work you're doing, and I think it's very important. And I can't wait to see when when the government approves this. I think that it's going to be huge, and you're going to continue to inspire and coach and guide people in this direction to our mental help the people who are suffering with mental health issues, because there's a lot out there. There's a lot.
It's part of my life's mission, and a person that had hard childhood issues,
Yeah.
and being a single mother
Mm-hmm.
created all these different levels of trauma.
Absolutely.
So doing the work, if
Doing the work.
I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, I did the work, so I don't have to suffer. Oh my gosh, so nobody else has to suffer. So we're suffering by choice. Oh my gosh,
Yes.
for some, right?
Exactly.
So I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to give of myself. This is my passion work. Thank God I have a 9 to 5 to cover my bills, so I can focus, right?
Perfect.
Either way, I'm here, and thank you all for joining.
No problem. And for those of you who'd like to reach out to Sabrina, there's her information below. It's at Bree_mental health instructor, and her Facebook page is the same. Well, Bree MH instructor. So thank you guys again for watching, and have a good night, everyone, and stay well. Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you, Sabrina.
Thank you.